Hi, welcome to A Gray Barn Rising. I'm here with Bootsy Beagle, and I'm reading the poems this evening of the Greek poet George Seferis. George Seferis lived from 1900 to 1971. He was born in Asia Minor, but spent the majority of his life in Athens, Greece, and also abroad. He was a Greek ambassador to other countries. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1963, and he's a remarkable poet of great depth, often exploring the ancient traditions of Greece, the classical mythologies, the histories of Greece, and how those histories and mythologies commingle in the modern era. He was deeply influenced by T.S. Eliot, though he's not a poet who sounds very much like Eliot, but he translated the work of T.S. Eliot, and I think they both share, in many ways, the concern for how the past commingles with, often collides with, the present and with the modern era. I'm going to be reading this evening from his collected poems, translated by Edmund Keeley and Philip Sherrard. And they are really the primary translators of George Seferis' work. Seferis was a poet who the people of Greece revered. As a matter of fact, he died when the Greek junta, the Greek colonels, were still in power. And during his funeral, there was a huge procession of people in the streets following his coffin. And they sang a song that had been set to, well, one of his poems had been set to music by the memorable composer Mikis Theodorakis, and it was his Seferis' poem Denial. And the poem had been banned, and the people went through the streets and sang the words to Seferis' poem following the coffin through the streets. So I'd like to begin by reading just one section of a very long poem titled Myth Hysterema, and this is the third section. And there's a little epigraph that begins, "Remember the baths where you were murdered. I woke with this marble head in my hands. It exhausts my elbows, and I don't know where to put it down. It was falling into the dream as I was coming out of the dream. So our life became one, and it will be very difficult for it to disunite again. I look at the eyes, neither open nor closed. I speak to the mouth, which keeps trying to speak. I hold the cheeks which have broken through the skin. I don't have any more strength. My hands disappear and come toward me, mutilated." One of the things that I think you'll notice in a George Seferis poem is this sense of feeling as if he loves his country but is simultaneously wounded by it. In fact, there's another poem of his, which I will not be able to read this evening, called In the Manner of G.S., for George Seferis, and it begins, "Wherever I travel, Greece wounds me." And that's a totemic line for George Seferis, because he's constantly dealing, like I said, with both the commingling and the collision of cultures. So I'd like to read now a very strange poem called The Old Man. So many flocks have passed, so many poor and rich riders, some from distant villages have spent the night in roadside ditches, lighting fires against the wolves. Do you see the ashes, blackish circles, cicatrized? He's full of marks like the road. In the dry well above, they'd thrown the rabid dog. He's got no eyes. He's full of marks. He's light. The wind blows. He distinguishes nothing, knows everything. Empty sheath of a cicada on a hollow tree. He's got no eyes, not even in his hands. He knows dawn and dusk, knows the stars, Their blood doesn't nourish him, nor is he dead. He has no race. He won't die. They'll simply forget him. He has no ancestors. His tired fingernails inscribe crosses on decayed memories while the wind blows darkly. It snows. I saw the hoarfrost around the faces. I saw the lips wet, tears frozen in the corner of the eye. I saw the line of pain by the nostrils and the effort at the roots of the hand. I saw the body come to an end. He isn't alone, this shadow bound to a dry, inflexible stick. He doesn't bend to lie down. He can't. Sleep will have scattered his joints as playthings into the hands of children. He commands like dead branches that break when night comes and the wind wakes in the ravines. He commands the shades of men, not the man in the shadow who hears nothing, but the low voices of earth and sea there where they mix with the voice of destiny. He stands upright on the bank among piles of bones, among heaps of yellow leaves, empty cage that waits for the hour of fire. I think you can hear some of the intensity of his explorations in that poem and some surreal, often dreamlike moments. He was one of the poets who embraced surrealism. He incorporated that into his other concerns as a poet. He's not strictly a surrealist poet, but he certainly incorporated that. This is a poem that's very different. It's short little sections, and I really love how Seferis did not put, although it's going to sound contradictory because I said sections, he did not place these poems in actual sections, but put little poems on subsequent pages, I think in order to explore the relationship between silence and language and to allow that empty space to emerge. So although they're not numbered sections, these very short poems in this poem, Epitaph, sort of function in that manner. I'll read them for you now. There's just a few of them. Epitaph. Coals and the fog were roses rooted in your heart, and the ashes covered your face each morning. Plucking cypress shadows you left a summer ago. Between two bitter moments, you don't have time even to breathe. Between your face and your face, the tender form of a child takes shape and vanishes. In the sea caves, there's a thirst, there's a love, there's an ecstasy, all hard like shells. You can hold them in your palm. In the sea caves, for whole days, I gazed into your eyes, and I didn't know you, nor did you know me. Stop looking for the sea and the waves fleece pushing the kayaks along under the sky. We are the fish and the trees are the seaweed. There's often a melancholy tone in Seferis's poems. In fact, I think of a wonderful phrase by a contemporary of his, another Nobel laureate, Odysseus Elitis. Elitis has a poem titled Aegean Melancholy. And although that poem is not dedicated to Seferis, I think that there certainly is a kind of Aegean melancholy permeating the poems of Seferis. This is one of my favorite Seferis poems called Memory One. And there's a little epigraph, and there was no more sea. And I with only a reed in my hands, The night was deserted, the moon waning, earth smelled of the last rain. I whispered, memory hurts wherever you touch it. There's only a little sky, there's no more sea. What they kill by day, they carry away in carts and dump behind the ridge. My fingers were running idly over this flute that an old shepherd gave to me because I had said good evening to him. The others have abolished every kind of greeting. They wake, shave, and start the day's work of slaughter as one prunes or operates methodically, without passion. Sorrow's dead like Patroclus, and no one makes a mistake. I thought of playing a tune, and then I felt ashamed in front of the other world, the one that watches me from beyond the night, from within my light, woven of living bodies, naked hearts, and love that belongs to the Furies as it belongs to man and to stone and to water and to grass and to the animal that looks straight into the eye of its approaching death. So I continued along the dark path and turned into my garden and dug and buried the reed, and again I whispered, some morning the resurrection will come. Dawn's light will blossom red as trees glow in spring. The sea will be born again, and the wave will again fling forth Aphrodite. We are the seed that dies, and I entered my empty house. Such a remarkable poem. It's called Memory One. And I'd like to close with, again, one of my favorite George Seferis poems. He had created a character, a persona through whom he wrote, named Mathias Paschalis, and he has several poems in the voice of Mathias Paschalis. This is entitled Mathias Paschalis Among the Roses. I've been smoking steadily all morning. If I stop, the roses will embrace me. They'll choke me with thorns and fallen petals. They grow crookedly, each with the same rose color. They gaze, expecting to see someone go by. No one goes by. Behind the smoke of my pipe, I watch them scentless on their weary stems. In the other life, a woman said to me, you can touch this hand and this rose is yours. It's yours. You can take it now or later, whenever you like. I go down the steps, smoking still, and the roses follow me down excited. And in their manner, there's something of that voice at the root of a cry. There where one starts shouting mother or help, or the small white cries of love. It's a small garden full of roses, a few square yards descending with me as I go down the steps without the sky. And her aunt would say to her, Antigone, you forgot your exercises today. At your age, I never wore corsets, not in my time. Her aunt was a pitiful creature, veins in relief, wrinkles all around her ears, a nose ready to die, but her words were always full of prudence. One day I saw her touching Antigone's breast like a small child stealing an apple. Is it possible that I'll meet the old woman now as I go down? She said to me as I left, who knows when we'll meet again? And then I read of her death in old newspapers, of Antigone's marriage and the marriage of Antigone's daughter, without the steps coming to an end, or my tobacco, which leaves on my lips the taste of a haunted ship with a mermaid crucified to the wheel while she was still beautiful. That poem is dated 19 1937, and I believe the memory poem is also dated 1937. No, the memory poem is not dated, so I'm glad I checked. But that poem is dated 1937. I want to, before I close, while I have your attention, I want to draw your attention to a wonderful biography of George Seferis that's very difficult to put down. If you get interested in his work, this is entitled Waiting for the Angel. And it's a marvelous read, and you'll learn more about Seferis through it. And also a book that has meant so much to me. This is a Seferis book, his diaries or his journals, and this is called A Poet's Journal. And the years are days of 1945 through 1951. I still remember my wife Mary Ann gave me this book nearly 35 years ago, something like that. And it was my constant companion. I carried it around everywhere. This book will also give you insights, his intimate, it represents his intimate reflections about his life and poetry and art and Greece. So again, I read from George Seferis' collected poems, translated by Edmund Keeley and Philip Sherrard. I really hope you'll go and seek out more of Seferis' work. It's massive in its number of poems, and I think it will be very rich and rewarding for you. Thank you so much for joining Bootsy and me for another episode of A Gray Barn Rising.